everybody, welcome back to Eggs the Podcast. Today's special guest is Kevin Murphy. He is founder at Evolve Art. How are you, Kevin? Welcome to the show.
I'm doing very well, Ryan. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Thrilled to death to have you here. In fact, we were having some fun just chatting for a minute before the show here, and we just decided we better hit start because there's just too many things going on. So
Sure.
I love it, and I'm excited to share this conversation with everyone. So, Kevin, let's start a little bit, just I guess kind of at the beginning. Let's talk a little bit about your career and how we kind of got to where we are today.
Okay. So I'm always told I need to do this very quickly, so I'm going to jump through it very fast.
I will say with us, you don't have to. You're welcome to kind of break it down because I think the backstory is so important to where
we'll be an hour just talking about how I got here. But
All
basically,
right,
I'd like to kind of make the point right up front. I grew up very poor. And I think that's important because I've built something and I started at zero. I had to break inertia, and it took a long time to get to a point where I was able to bend the curve and make it almost vertical. And so, anytime, because I always hear people say, well, like, it looks like I have talent. It looks like I have all these things going for me. And it's like, well, but I started at zero. Most people don't. And so if you're at zero, this should be, hopefully inspirational that you're not locked there. And if you've already got a leg up, that, people who have a lot less than you can make it work so you can find a way. And I think that's a very important thing. But I grew up very poor. I grew up in the Bronx. And I was a terrible student in school, as most creatives are. I barely graduated high school. I graduated high school with a 68 average, 65 being passing.
Wow.
And I was always called lazy. I didn't do the work. I'm intelligent, but I was bored, and I was in a place, in a system, the school system, that didn't fit me, and so it wasn't a good match. And so I was an underachiever. I had all these things kind of stacked against me. And, but I was friendly. And so the teachers passed me. In New York, that happens. If you're not assaulting teachers, they'll pass you just to let you move on. I graduated high school. I could barely read. I could read about one page in a regular, like a mass market book, like a regular novel, one page every 10 minutes. Borderline illiterate. And I got through 12 years of high school like that. And so when I say I started at zero, I could barely read when I graduated high school. And without any other prospects, I got a job as a union construction worker in the city. And so I spent the next 3 years of my life traveling down to the city. And back then there was no tech. There was like a Walkman. That was it. And so I'd get on the train at 5:30 in the morning and look at all the homeless people. And I was bored out of my mind. And so I asked a couple of friends if they could recommend to me some books that I could read that would be like really, really good books that even though they'd be awful to read, I would enjoy. It would be worthwhile. And I was handed a couple of great novels. I read them. Very painful to get through them. It took me weeks and weeks and weeks to get through these books. And then I decided, you know what, I'm going to take a course on speed reading. I took a course. It was a weekend course. And that had an impact. I got to a point where I was reading at a decent speed. And then I went and I took a real speed reading course. By the time I finished working construction, 3 years, I'd read almost 1,000 books on everything you could possibly think of. And I just found it so interesting. I've always enjoyed learning. In school, it didn't fit me. It just wasn't a match. So at the 3-year mark, working construction, I went into work one day. It was bitter cold. I got off down at the World Trade Center and was walking across to Battery Park. It's bitter cold down there. There's so much wind. And I thought to myself, I don't want to do this anymore. I liked the work. I liked working with my hands, but the mornings were awful and the winters were just brutal. And so I went into work. I packed up all my tools and I gave them to one of the apprentices and I quit. I burned the ships, all of my tools. I had nothing to work with and I went home and I decided I wanted to do book covers. I had been reading all these really great science fiction and fantasy novels and I loved the artwork on them. And I decided I was going to become an illustrator. I had no idea what the odds were. Had I known, I probably would not have gone that route. But I think not knowing the odds was actually a benefit. I just jumped into it. I did everything I could. I committed the energy. I figured I wasn't going to be outworked. People might know more than me, but I was not going to be outworked. And if you're not outworked, there's a great saying. Hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. And so it didn't matter what the gifts of other people were, that I was not going to be outworked. And through a series of things, I got myself to a place where about 2 years later, where I was a working professional in the industry. I started with a major publishing company and quickly expanded into all kinds of different areas, video game covers. And I did that for the next 8 years. I was responsible for about 300, maybe 350 commercial illustrations. My big claim to fame was I did a cover for the Rolling Stones, for the band, not the magazine, but the band. And that was in 97, I believe. It was the Bridges to Babylon. And so I got to do this painting, and they hung an 85-foot banner of my painting off the Brooklyn Bridge when they announced the tour. This is the size of an 8-story building, a painting I did. It was like, it doesn't get better than that. And I'd clawed my way there. I didn't know how any of the industries worked. I made lots of mistakes. I fumbled around. I fell on my face. I struggled. I didn't even really know how to paint. I was able to build paintings through sheer hard work, not through understanding. And so I eventually, I got out of doing illustration, and I opened a publishing company to do science fiction books with a couple of friends from the industry, and I started doing portrait work. I spent the next 20 years doing portraits. I still do them from time to time these days. I don't have a lot of time for them, but I do take them occasionally. The publishing company went on for about 10 years. We were eventually just crushed by the distributors. But we did about 150 titles, and one of them was the limited edition of Game of Thrones. So I worked with George R.R. Martin for almost 6 years on that project.
Wow.
And so that went away. And again, so, I had an illustration career, and I got out of that. And then we opened a publishing company that fell apart on us. We built it up. It was doing really well. And then just the industry, you have the giant publishers, and then they control their own destinies, but the small publishers are at the whim of the distributors. And the distributors basically ran us out of business. Just bad policies on their end and no concern for us. And they ran us out of business. So I had to deal with, what I thought was going to be my future collapsing. And at that point, I had 2 young children. And it was like, okay, like, what am I going to do now? And so I decided to open up a school. I was doing portrait work, but my kids, I was a stay-at-home dad the first 5 years because my portrait work allowed that. And so here I am, I had cut back on my work significantly as a portrait painter, and I was paid well. Like, I was paid very well for that work, but I was only doing about a third of what I normally did in a year. And that type of work, you have to work in order to get work, right? Because it's what you do that people see that generates the next job. And so if you're doing 3 paintings a year, they go up on the walls in people's homes, and it's like, how many people see it? But if you're doing 12 or 15 a year, it generates the next iteration of commissions. And so by doing such a small body of work, it paid bills, but it required me to start doing a lot of cold calling to find clients. And so I decided when my oldest daughter was 5 and it was time to kind of get her into preschool, or 4, I decided, okay, I'm going to open up an art school. I've always wanted to do this. It was very hard for me to find a way into the industry. And so I decided to open up the kind of art school that I wish I had when I was young. I knew what the need was because it was my need years earlier. And so I opened up an art school. And over the next I opened it in April of 2009. And between then and now, that school grew from 12 seats, doubled to 24, and then up to 37 seats. At one point, the school had over 200 students in it every week. We opened a second school in New Jersey, and then eventually opened it up into it was then turned into an online program, which is Evolve Artist. And then from there, it's been opened up into an international franchise. And it's just one thing on top of another, but it was getting the toehold, like finding the place where I had something to offer. As an illustrator, fine, I had things to offer to publishing companies. As a portrait painter, I had something to offer to individual people wanting to have their children or their wives or their family documented. When I opened the art school, I was able to offer something to arguably millions of people. It started very small. It started in my neighborhood, but has now expanded into something global. And so for any of your listeners who have not read the book, The Go-Giver, the author's last name is Berg. There's 2 of them. I can never remember the second guy's name, but Berg is the first.
Yeah.
The Go-Giver.
Berg, we know. Yep.
one of the greatest books on business you could read. If you haven't read it and you have a business, shame on you. You know, um,
Yeah,
it,
you're not
it,
wrong.
yes. So I hadn't heard of it. I had built my business. I had it locally, and a friend of mine gave me the book, and he was like, "You're already doing this on so many levels. Read this book. It'll quantify all the things you're doing, and it'll show you how to grow what you have in a meaningful way." And so I read the book, and I realized like I had something. I had built the program I wish that I had had coming up, the program that I believe that could take anybody from being an amateur to being a pro. And so I started by then that's I so I started to put the program together to build a franchise, right? Because the idea is build something of value, right? The Go Giver, build something of great value, and then find a way, give it away at a price that's a steal that anyone can access, and then disseminate it as widely as you can, not for the sake of making sales, but for the sake of letting the people who are looking for what you are offering, making it available to them wherever they are. And um, so I built the program out and set it up to become a franchise model. And that's when I was approached about bringing it online. And so I went in that direction first. We built out the online program, Evolve Artist. And then through Evolve Artist, we've now been able to open, like I said, an international chain of schools. And that chain is just getting started. It's in the process of being scaled up. We're expecting to have over 100 schools nationally by 2035.
Yeah,
And
that's amazing.
the whole platform is, if you want to be an artist and make a living at it, we can give you the skills. We can put everything you need in front of you. All you have to do is show up and do the work. And it's not hard work. Um, the program is designed that if a 5-year-old could do it, right? The education is simplified to the point where if you prompted a 5-year-old with the questions, that a 5-year-old could answer them. They might not have the fine motor dexterity to make the paintings, but if it's designed around a 5-year-old's thinking, a 20-year-old could certainly do it, right? And the whole 5-year-old thing comes from Einstein. If you can't explain something so that a 5-year-old understands it, you don't actually understand it yourself. So the program has been designed around that idea to make
Yeah.
it so that anybody could understand it. And then it just comes down to, are you willing to do the work? Are you willing to be patient and put in the time and be thoughtful as you move through the program? It takes 1 year to go from having never picked up a brush to producing professional level work. That's not going to make you a top tier pro, but if you want to produce professional level work, like entry level pro work, 12 months. 12 months at
Yeah,
like 7 hours a week, 1
I
hour a
love
day.
that. Well, let's go back because there's like 100 things in here that I was just sitting here scribbling notes the whole time. So first of all,
Sure.
for people who aren't aware, we had Bob Berg, the author of The Go Giver, on the show about a month ago. So
Oh,
people can go
awesome.
back and catch our interview with
I,
Bob. He was
I
a
will.
long time hero of mine. I've been using this phrase, this idea that people know you, like you, trust you forever, as long as I can remember. And that was attributed to him many years ago. By a guy that I knew, a radio executive that taught me when I was 18 about business. And that was the language he learned. So just a couple of years ago, I was able to connect with Bob and we were able to have him on the show this year. So I was excited about that. Second thing that I'm really jacked about is that Bridges to Babylon album that you did. Also, I guess in collaboration with one of my all-time favorite designers, Stefan Sagmeister.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, he's awesome.
Yeah, you probably can't
Yeah.
see it, but I have a little thing over here on the side signed by Stefan. I met him in Cleveland a few years ago, and I guess it's been before COVID now, so some time ago. But yeah, no, he's one of my all-time favorite design guys.
Yeah, back in the 90s, he was a god. Like he was like, there was nobody even remotely like him. He was such an interesting, when I first met him, what an interesting guy. Like really, really cool guy and down to earth, crazy. Like,
yeah, no, I just met him. I met him at a Starbucks, and in that moment, it was a very brief moment with him. But in that, just like, I don't know, the 30 seconds, 2 minutes, whatever it was with him, like he treated me as if I was the only person in the room. You know what I mean?
yes.
And I was at a design conference and everyone there was excited to see Stefan. But in that couple moments that I got with him, it was just like, wow, like this is an interesting guy. And he's kind of an imposing guy too. He's a big dude. And,
so he's like 6'3".
Yeah. So when you hang out around that guy, he's kind of got this aura around him. And he was a speaker at the event I was at. Is how
his confidence through earned confidence is through the roof.
Yeah.
You don't fake that.
Well, and that's maybe something to talk about, to go back to your life story, but then also as it pertains to people who are getting into art, because I do think a big part of getting into this, and maybe you'll agree or disagree, but I think a big part for people who might want to try a program like Evolve is, developing the confidence to do the thing. I think for most people, we're
Sure.
afraid to take the first step. And it's funny
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
like we were talking before the show, but I mean, I've basically been a lifelong artist, illustrator. I do a lot of cartooning and digital illustration on paper before digital was a thing. And even for me, I've been procrastinating around getting into painting for the last couple of years. And I think a big part of it is, well, I'm good at this stuff, and now I have to go start being bad at something again. And
Yes.
so there's like this built-in fear that's keeping me from doing the thing. But to take that back to sort of your life story, you were a guy that was just doing construction and living your life in the Bronx and all that stuff. And then you just decided, hey, today I'm an illustrator. like, so
Yeah.
I mean, some of this, and I'll give you guys on the East Coast a little bit of, I mean, there's kind of the stereotypical Jersey confidence that just, some of you guys rock and you're able to just go, you know what, I want to be an illustrator now. But I don't know if that was your case, but to be able to make that pivot, and it's such a dramatic pivot without even knowing what's ahead of you, I think is a really great learning moment, or something for people to think about. Because I think, and I mentioned before the show, I've been doing a lot of these reading on mindset and things like this. And so Bob Berg's actually one of these guys that I've reread recently because of that. And there's this moment, or these things that we do because we think we always have to, right? Like we kind of run through life in cruise control, right? You easily could have stayed doing construction. You didn't hate the work. You liked what you were doing. Maybe it was a little cold that day and it drove you out or whatever. But I mean,
I could have just moved to a warmer climate.
Theoretically, you could just be still building. Yeah. You could still be doing work in Florida or something. You know what I mean? So, but you still made a conscious decision to chase down something. And so there's kind of, there's a discussion here around, chasing passions or whatever. Maybe you already had an interest in illustration. So we should maybe talk about that, why illustration versus something else. But I wonder if you could talk a little bit about just sort of the decision-making process, as best you can recall it. Obviously, it's been a minute. But if you can talk about just sort of making that decision to make the move, because I think that moment is a real pivotal spot where a lot of people just kind of stand on the edge and go, man, I wish I could just take that next step, but they just don't. Yeah. And then they live a life that they didn't do what they wanted to do, or they stay maybe it's not forever, but maybe they stay in some place longer than they should have because they were afraid to take that step. So maybe you talk a little bit about just sort of your mindset in that moment.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not one to be risk averse. I never have been. I take risks. I have always been that way. And I know not everybody is like that. You can tell somebody, well, just go do it. And it's like, you can see the fear, right? And it's like, for me, I can have fear, but it doesn't stop me. So you think about, if anybody who's ever like jumped off like a 20-foot cliff into water, the longer you stand there and look down, the harder it becomes. And it's like, if you just get up there and you're committed to it and you walk up to the edge and jump, just find out what happens on the other end. It's water down there, and you just do it. And then you realize like, well, that wasn't so bad. And I think most of us have been through that. Like you think about like, you're dating when you're younger, and it's like you want to break up with somebody, and it's so hard to do that. And then once it's done, like the relief that comes from having gotten it done, not just that you've now established something in your life that you wanted, but also I think much more important is that you have proven to yourself, you go back to confidence, that you can do something that you set your mind to, and that on the other side of it, it's okay. And I think like that's how you learn. Like you can stand in front of a mirror and all day and say, I'm wonderful and I'm good and I'm going to be successful. But the truth is we only build confidence through evidence that we are what we say we are, right? Yeah. You show up every day and you're like, whatever it is, you go into the gym and you lift and you get stronger, and you know that you're strong because every day you get stronger. And you know what you can lift, you know what you can push. If you run, you know how far you can run, and you know you can push yourself further because you have the evidence day after day after day, built one day upon another, that you've done it. You've earned it. And I think that, too many people are too afraid to take a leap. And so they never build the confidence that comes naturally from just taking the risks. People who take risks, you see them. They take a risk and it's a small one, and then they take another one because that first one was successful. Or even if they fell down, they realized they didn't get banged up that badly. Out 10 years, they're now taking gigantic risks, fearless. And it's not because they're fearless, but because they have learned that the risks, they're not so bad even when you fail. And the risks get bigger and bigger and bigger as you become more confident with your ability to bounce if you hit the ground. And I think that's a big thing, like you think about like, when a young child, a year-old, starts walking, if you run around behind them and every time they fall, you catch them, you do that until they're an adult, and then they fall down for the first time and they're 6 feet tall. Those falls hurt. But if you start falling when you're, 2 feet tall with a squishy diaper, yeah, it's a little scary, but you learn that you can fall down and get up and fall and get up and fall and get up. And as you get taller and the falls become higher, you're not afraid of them.
Yeah.
Like we had a
Well, and
thing.
I love this idea that you're talking about, this sort of life on a spectrum, right? And that the decisions sort of scale over time, or the more time you put in. I was thinking as you were talking about this idea of art sort of as a metaphor, and using painting or drawing or something that, we might be familiar with, using art as a metaphor for risk aversion, right? Because I think you're right. I mean, most people aren't as risk or are maybe a little risk averse. Most people, I think, don't like to take big risks, and especially to take a jump from, construction into art, for example. I mean, they're so diametrically opposed. But I think that New Yorkers, or at least, and this is obviously gross generalization, but for the New Yorkers and the East Coaster guys, I think, and maybe this accounts for anybody in any big city, but when you're in a big area like that, and when you grow up in environments like that, I feel like you get a little bit more comfortable with risk, because there's always something going on. You got to be a little more aware. There's stuff. Yeah, there's things all around, right? So you got to be a little bit more aware. But so to break this down into something that people might be able to do in their own life, if you grew up in some great Midwest town and you're super risk averse, if you think about art as a metaphor, I mean, basically, if you're drawing a picture, if you're going through like the artistic process, maybe even into painting, and obviously I'm not an expert in that space, but I can talk a little bit about it. There's this spectrum where we think, if you're looking from the outside, like I'm looking at this painting behind you right now, Kevin, I'm going, wow, what a beautiful piece of art, man, I could never do something like that, but you didn't start with that. That wasn't number one. That's not, Kevin's very first painting, for example. And so, but as people, we come into these environments where we see people who are already really established, and we go, oh, I can't do that, therefore I can't do this. Right. And there's this idea that things need to happen overnight. And there's, one thing we've discovered in 450 interviews with different, business leaders, is that everybody is a 10-year overnight success. Somebody worked 10 years to build the thing that now you're jealous of. Right. And so to your point earlier about, little steps and bigger risks over time, I think that's that. But like, if you think about art as a metaphor for risk, the risk is never so great, right? You're almost never in a position where you've actually got to scrap a piece of art. It doesn't, I mean,
but
sure,
even
it
if
happens,
you have to, even if you have to, so what?
Yeah.
You fall down, things are a mess. You pick up and you start over. Like for me, even though I jumped ship, I gave all my tools away, and I could have gone back if I had to. Like, it's not like that door was shut forever. I could have gone and found some small non-union shop working outside of the city and to make some money if I had to. But I had decided I wasn't going to have a plan. Like, that's another thing. I don't have plan Bs. It's plan A or it's nothing. And if plan A doesn't work, right, you put everything in because you have no other options. You see it through. You see it through until you have no gas left in the tank. And once you get there, then it's like, okay, well, that didn't work. Now what? But it's like, you're living your own life, and a lot of the time, if you're going to put in that kind of effort, you're going to be fine. Like, you can't go in dumb. You have to do your due diligence and make sure you know the industry you're going into, that you're skilled. You have to be willing to do the work. I mean, I would make the argument that the average American, I don't know about overseas, but the average American spends their life humming along at about 25% of their potential.
Yeah, I think that's right.
I see it at the gym.
I
see it everywhere I go. And it's like, I see it in the school with my students. If you could do 50% of your potential, you're better than almost everybody. Or they say, if you put in 1 hour, I think it's one hour a week into anything, you'll be more skilled at that thing than like 95% of the people in the world.
Yeah,
like,
it's the joke I always tell my son.
Right? It's something like that. And it's like, right, so what if you put in, 10 times that? Where does that place you? Right? And if you want to go into something, find the person who's already doing what you want to do and lean on them. See how they do it. Stand in their shadow. Carry their boxes so you can watch what they do. Like that, apprenticeships, mentorships are like the greatest thing in the world if you can do it. And if you've already done your work and you go and you stand, like, again, if you understand how real estate works and then you go stand in the shadow of somebody who has billions and billions of dollars of real estate, you follow them around, in a week, you'll be a completely different investor. Your world will be different, and your confidence, you'll see it happening. You'll be like, I could do this. I understand how this works. Right. And so I think in anything, like, you do all the work you can, and when you run out of runway and you don't know where else to go, then find somebody who is where you want to be and see if you can shadow them. A
Yeah, I
lot of
love that.
people are very generous with their time, as long as you're not wasting it. As long as you're not wasting it. I've found most people are very generous with the knowledge they have. The people who are doing really well, the ones who aren't doing really well that only look like they are, they protect, they guard what they know. But people who are wildly successful in what they do share it openly because they're not threatened by other people
Yeah.
coming up to the
Well,
speed
and
that
they're
they were.
coming at it from the right perspective, kind of like you were talking about with your schools, or following the go giver approach, which is this idea that you created something great. And now you're, I mean, you're not giving it away, but I mean, you're making it available at a cost that people can afford. And, so you're doing this thing, and, I mean, it can be a business and you can make money. It doesn't have to be strictly philanthropy, but at the same time, you're putting something out there. And for a lot of people who maybe don't have mentors, or have trouble finding mentorships and things like that, there's a lot of virtual mentoring that you can do these
Yeah.
days where you follow people around, or, I mean, with YouTube and stuff like that. I mean,
Yeah.
I can't tell you. I mean, there's a list of artists that I follow and watch their process, and I watch what they do, and I, all this stuff. And I don't know these people, but, I can get a lot of the same things that I might from an internship just by watching their content or participating
Yes.
with them online. And so,
Or
and
just their
I would,
attitude, their
yeah,
attitude alone, like
yeah, no,
how
it's
they think
huge.
about what they do. Yeah.
Well, and it's one thing I would say in particular about art, and it's a little different if you're doing this online. But if if let's say you begin taking the Evolve program, and that sparks an interest in art with you, and then you decide you want to go to maybe a community painting center or something. There's these things all over. I mean, you'll find in those communities, you will find the spectrum of artists, right? You'll have the guy
Yes.
that's the grandmaster that's been doing this thing forever, and he's the pro. And then you've got, everybody in between, all the way down to the guy who, this is my first time in an art class. And
Right.
I went to a figure drawing class just a couple of years ago, and it was like that. And the woman who was guiding the course was, expert portraiture, and one of the things I struggle with in particular is capturing likeness. Like, I would love to be better with people, and I do okay with like body and shapes and things like that, but I just struggle capturing likeness. It's just something that's never been easy for me. But working under somebody like her, who it just comes, seemingly so natural for her. Now, obviously she's put in the work, but,
Yeah.
but it seemingly comes so easily for her. It was really inspiring to work under that and go, oh, okay, well, I have a hand and she has a hand, and we're each using the same charcoal, and we're each using the same newsprint, and we're each, like, we can put this together.
Yeah.
Like, it's not, if she can do it, I can do it, kind of thing.
You know
And,
what's
and
funny?
seeing it done is a big deal.
From the outside, if you watch it, what you'll find the major difference between the two of you is that she's probably very relaxed. She's not worried about the result, and you are.
Yeah.
She's just pushing the charcoal or the paint around, and it looks so natural because she's so comfortable. And it doesn't mean that she's not nervous about things not working out, right? Like, again, like when you do a demonstration, like for me, if I do a demonstration and I've got a couple hundred people watching me, I can fall on my face, and that's a great height to fall from. So there's a lot of pressure to perform. But the thing is, if I can step into it and just be like, I don't really care what happens, I'm just going to paint. And I've done this where I've done a demo and I've struggled with it. And I make the point, I am not special. I am solving the same problems as my students, and I'm struggling with this. I know if I take another half hour, more than I was expecting, I'll pull it around. And so it doesn't matter that it's falling apart at the moment. It doesn't rattle me. And again, it comes back to confidence. I've done it enough times. I know I can make it work. If you walk into something and it's like you're like tightly wound, very, very hard to perform, almost impossible. And so when you watch, incredible athletes, you watch them, even like these like MMA fighters, the guys who win, look at how loose they are. They go out there and it's like, yeah, they want to win, but they're just out there to have fun. You can watch them like they're loose and relaxed. You hear the commentators, they're like, oh, so-and-so looks so relaxed tonight. You know that guys, he's on. He's on point that night because he's gone out there and he's not like, he doesn't look worried. He's just out there to do his thing. And when you're relaxed like that, it's so easy to perform. And it doesn't matter what it is. It really doesn't matter. Right?
No, I
You think
think you're
about it.
right.
If you walked across a balance beam in gymnastics, put that balance beam on the floor where you take it when you first come in, when you like your day one stuff. Anybody could walk across it. 6 inches wide. Anybody could walk across it. But if you take it and put it 4 feet off the ground where gymnastics is done, the fear of falling, most people are like, oh my God, you struggle to get across. And it's like, well, nothing's changed but your attitude about it. It's the same 6-inch beam. You're just thinking differently about it. And that tension makes it almost impossible to get across without wobbling or falling. And you think about an Olympic gymnast can dance across and stick landings backwards on that beam. If you took that same beam and put it 100 feet in the air, you'd be hard pressed to find an Olympian that could even crawl across it. It's the same beam, but it's like how you think about it, how you come into it. And that's in all things. Like if you're that paralyzed, you're not going to start a business. You're not going to take a risk. You're not going to jump off the rocks into the water. You wind up paralyzed in that space. And it's like, how do you take that balance beam from 100 feet in the air and remind yourself that it's the same balance beam as if you put it on the ground? It's still a 6-inch beam. Yeah. And it's like, you kind of have to be in your own head to be able to do that.
Well, I think that's right. And I think it's one of the topics that you talk about, which is this notion of talent. And whether talent is really a thing to contend with. And you actually led earlier with a comment or a thought about talent, yes, which was that, talent wasted is no better than hard work. And I think that's right. I mean, I've known a lot of people just even in my own life and business career that, they may not be the best business person on the planet, but by God, they'll outwork you and they'll get it done. And, and you can make arguments whether out hustling people is a better approach or not. But what's your thoughts on talent specifically? And I'm sure this comes up a lot in art. A lot of people will look at artists and like, even I just slipped into it a moment ago. And I mentioned that this person I was working under just came at it so naturally. Like it was just so easy for her. Right. And it was easy for her now because she did the work, but she, may or may not have been talented. I don't really know, or what we would sort of consider talented. And so, but my whole life, people have been like, oh, you're so talented for this and for that. Right. But then what does that really mean? Like to your point, if I waste it, then
I'll tell you that when people tell me that I'm talented, I quietly despise the term. I say thank you because they don't realize it's an insult. You wouldn't tell a neurosurgeon who spent 15 years of their life working 15-hour days to develop their skills that they're talented. You recognize the effort. There's no talent. There's just hard work. Show up, do the work. I am not talented by any stretch of the imagination as an illustrator, as a painter, but I am arguably in the top 1% of portrait painters in the world and arguably in one of the top educators in the world based on result. Based on results, we compete. To give you an idea, because it sounds arrogant. I have 15-year-olds in my school that study at my school 2.5 hours a week. It's 100 hours a year. And they beat out consistently in international competitions, beat out 19-year-olds that are studying in 40-hour-a-week programs in Italy. How? Well, because the program's just better. And those programs like the Florence Academy, and they skim the best of the best of the best off the top. They take just the top group, the most focused, driven, arguably adults into their program. And my 15-year-olds trounce them in international competitions every time. How? They're there. My students will do 100 hours in a year. Their students do 100 hours in 2.5 weeks. And they do it for a year. How do we beat them? The program is just sound, right? Yeah. So, but it's not talent. It's you show up and you have to get a good education, right? So where you go for your education matters, right? If you want to be a great golfer, do you go to Joe's golf shack, or you go to Tiger Woods, right? And I say Tiger Woods, like maybe he's not a good teacher, but you kind of get the idea. You go to the guy who basically sells, time on a range, or do you go to a guy who is world renowned for their skills, for their deliverables? And if you have the choice between Tiger Woods and somebody else, and you then look at who they've trained, maybe Tiger Woods has trained a few people, but they've not gone anywhere. This other guy who may not be as significant as Tiger Woods has trained nothing but champions, right? There's a great judo. He may have passed already. He used to be the judo instructor at Columbia University. I'm drawing a blank on his name. Incredible judoka. And he trained something like 8 Olympic gold medalists. Like, you want to learn how to play judo, there's your guy. He's a little guy. He came over here after World War II. The United States actually gave citizenship. There were like 5 of them, 5 top shelf judo players, and brought them over here and basically set them up and gave them gave them everything they needed because we wanted to build out judo teams for the Olympics. So they were given citizenship and everything. Incredible. But it's like, if you want to learn, it's not always the best person. I don't think that he ever competed in the Olympics. I'm pretty sure he didn't. But he's trained more Olympic gold medalists than anyone. And I'm saying 8. It could be 30. I don't remember. Female gold medalists as well. But just an incredible trainer. And it's like, so again, like, all of his people look talented, but they're not talented. They're well trained. They're well trained.
Well, and I think that's a great point. And actually, the word that I wrote down here is dismissive, right? Saying somebody's talented is a little bit dismissive of what it takes. But I think what's interesting too is that's language that we use commonly, because I think that's how you describe the act of being good, right? We talk about it as being talented. I think that's just why people use that word.
But you could make the argument for talent in some things. Art is not so easy. Art, when you say talent, encompasses everything. But like, let's say you're an athlete. There are athletes who are naturally stronger, naturally, without going into a gym, are stronger, right? And what it is that they naturally have thicker tendons. Those thicker tendons allow their muscles to do so much more. There are people who are naturally faster. Now, again, if you take somebody who is naturally faster and they don't train, or they don't train as hard as somebody who is not as fast, they will be overtaken. But if you're Michael Jordan and you are gifted, you're tall and you're fast and you're agile and you have all of these natural physical gifts, and then you train, you become Michael Jordan.
Well, right? And your comment about wasted talent, I mean, is no more visible than it is in like professional sports, for example. I mean, there's a lot of kids, like, both my boys are involved in playing football, American football. And as they've grown and gone through these programs,
isn't it awful that you have to say that?
I know, and I only do that for our friends. We have a lot of people in Spain that listen.
When I was a kid, we knew that if you played soccer, that you weren't born here.
Right.
And I'm Irish. I have a lot of Irish friends. They all play soccer, and it's like growing up. Like, it was like we knew who wasn't born here because they all played soccer, and that was their sport.
Yeah.
And during the summer, I would go upstate and I would hang out. We played soccer all the time, but it was like. And they called it football, and I was like, "What?
What?"
But it's But I mean, it's a good thing. I mean, but it's just funny. Like, anytime I hear like something like that, where you say football, the American type, it always kind of brings me back.
Well,
to
it's
that.
just funny. I have so many friends that are European, and we have a pretty established presence in Spain and stuff. And so I just out of habit, I say American football now.
Yeah.
But anyway, the boys
actually evolve. My business partner is in Barcelona.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that's our city. Yeah, we love it there.
Yeah,
that's our spot. Yeah, I would pitch putting an art school there, but you probably got it handled then if you've got a buddy there.
Well, we haven't done it yet. He's not looking to open a school. He's evolve. So he's my business partner in the online school.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Well, very cool. So, but the point I was trying to make anyway is that in sports, there's no shortage of people who are talented. And like, especially as you come through youth sports and things like that, my boys have played football with guys who, as 5th, 6th, 7th graders, 8th graders, 9th graders were, super athletes by comparison.
Right.
But then when everybody gets to, 11th and 12th grade or whatever, we're all on the same page now. Right. So you're right that there are natural gifts. I think there's also natural inclinations. Like, I started drawing when I was very young, by like 5 or 6, I was like drawing all the time, Yeah. And so for me, I had that inclination where, like, in my own boys, they're both relatively artistic, but they didn't draw to it like the way I did. And, so there's a little bit of natural inclination too. And that interest helped maybe, steer being able to do those things at a professional level.
Well, that's the thing though. That's the thing. Have you read Outliers?
Yes.
So like, you see how they say like, kids born in, I forget which 3 months, account for like 95% of all professional hockey players in Canada. Yeah. And right. And the idea is that you're born there. And so you're potentially 12 months older than another kid that's 5 years old when you go into the top hockey league. A year older at that point, right? You're both 5 years old, so 11 months difference. You're crushing that kid that just turned 5. They have no chance. Yep. Because a 1 year of development at that age is incredible. And so it's only the kids born in, say, September, October, November that, right, they look gifted because they're so much better because they're just more developed. So they get all of the extra care and all the attention and the better equipment, and because they look gifted, and that gives them a leg up again on top of. And so then the disparity year by year gets greater and greater. The great artists, the kids that go into school, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, and they look incredibly talented, they're the ones who aren't out playing baseball and soccer and football. They're at home drawing. And so they show up at school and they look gifted, but all it is that they spend their time making art because that's
Yeah.
what they like, right?
Well, yeah.
It's applied interest is
Yeah. And so
talent.
I think just to kind of put a bow on this notion of talent, I think what it should do is, or what this conversation should do for people is encourage you to, you can actually do anything you want, because it really isn't
Sure.
this, God-given or innate ability. There might be
No.
differences in people, but as far as you're concerned, if you are the average person who's interested in getting into art, and maybe a program like this is the way to get started for you, it's not about being talented or quote unquote talented, right? It's really about just doing the work. And I think you can apply
Yeah,
that
yeah,
to art. You could apply that to business. Even just life,
yeah.
keeping relationships together,
Mhm. And I
whatever
think
it is, it's about time, interest, effort, these kinds of things. And
yeah,
everybody has those, thank
I
goodness.
think one of the tough things, and especially for adults, but even for kids, it's very hard to know what a good program is. You want to learn how to box. Where do you go? Right? You don't know anything, so every boxing place looks decent. You want to learn how to do something, like where do you go? Right? You could go online. So I would say, like, if you go online and you look at a lot of the portrait painters, the artists that are out there, the pros that are doing demos, and you can watch that and it looks incredible and it looks like an education. But I'd argue that it's not. An education in art is like an education in language. If you want to learn how to, let's say you want to learn to write poetry in Japanese, you have to learn the language first. There's no poetry until you learn how to write the letters, and then you have to learn vocabulary, and and you have to learn sentence structure, and you have to all of these things before you can creatively write. Right? And you think about in English, we have 26 letters in our alphabet. Imagine if you learned the fundamentals, the alphabet, but the person teaching you forgot to teach you 5 of the letters. Just 20%. Now the language becomes extraordinarily clumsy. You can still pretty much say what you want, but instead of being able to concisely describe something in one sentence, it might take 5 to kind of come around in a circle because you're missing letters. So a word that has a letter T you can't use, you have to find other ways, right? So just 20% of the language, of the vocabulary, of the letters missing from the alphabet, and the language becomes very clumsy. And that is the entry point into the language. That is fundamental. But what if the 5 letters that were missing were the vowels? The language completely collapses. So you can watch somebody like a great orator read Shakespeare, but that's performance. That person doing that speaking, that's all built on top of an alphabet. And if you don't have those 26 letters and know how they work, and you don't know the 2 and the 3 and the 4-letter words and all, and then have, it's the spelling and it's the vocabulary and the grammar, and then understanding how to organize your thoughts before adding an artistic flair to it and turning it into poetry, right? It looks like the poetry is its own thing in art. The finished art is the thing. And it's like, no, it's the alphabet that's holding it up. And if you don't understand the alphabet, you can't make great art. There is a hard ceiling on what you can produce. The problem for people is that the alphabet doesn't look like anything by itself. And so when you go out and you're looking for a program, you look like our program doesn't look like anything at the beginning because it's steeped in an alphabet and 2-letter and 3-letter words. Where you go and you look at a guy like Cesar Santos, a great example. He's an incredible painter. You go and you watch his videos and he's describing things and it's like, wow, that makes sense. But he's describing something that requires a full understanding of those underpinnings, but the underpinnings are never described. And so it looks like there's a huge education there. But the truth is that you're building, if you don't have the fundamentals in place, you're building on quicksand. You can't build much of a structure on something that just eats up what you put on top of it.
Yeah,
So
no, you're not wrong. And
yeah.
and it's funny too, because right now there's kind of this push for free courses, and there's always this free stuff, and there's always this economic incentive, right? Because to your point, I mean, I know there's probably competitive art schools, and if I have to choose one and I only have X number of dollars to put into an art program, some people will choose correctly and some people will choose one that doesn't do anything for them. And so there is a real risk there. And so I think that taking the time to learn about these things and learn about fundamentals. And I think that's one of the things that you do that's so interesting is I think, like we talked about earlier, a lot of people want to jump to the end. They don't want to they don't want to learn the alphabet. They want to start doing Shakespeare.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and instead of reverse engineering that or whatever, people try and sort of jump to the end. And so I've seen this at least when people, would draw or whatever. And everybody's got their own style or whatever. But for me, like I like to sketch and then build up, So I'll start with basic shapes and then build up and start working through an illustration that way. Where other people or people who maybe kind of want to jump more to the end, try and start with like big shapes that are really weird. And, they kind of make the shape of a thing, but it's not, they didn't build that fundamental stuff that really helps with developing the structure of a thing, for example,
right,
or helping you understand how something fits spatially. Instead, they're kind of just jumping to the end. And I think you can see a lot of difference in people's illustrations based on sort of how they're approaching it, because I think that there's just some, whatever those intangibles are, where you're starting to figure out spatial dynamics and how to move stuff with light and all that kind of stuff. If you just jump to the end and you're just kind of mimicking what you see on screen versus understanding how to build it up from the ground,
right.
I think the output ends up being quite different.
Right.
And
well,
it's
we
also
don't draw. We don't draw or paint what we see. We draw and paint what we understand about what we see. And I think that's a very big part of it, right? People can look at something and they draw it and it's like, well, this isn't very good. And what it is they don't actually understand what they're looking at. If they understood it, they'd be able to draw without a problem. The skill to use to draw or to paint, the physical ability with your hand, your brain can tell your brain can tell your hand what to do. Like writing your name in script is actually, it requires greater fine motor control than making a painting of a person, a portrait. Right? It's not that painting requires great fine motor dexterity. It's just a normal amount. It's less than what you need to write your name in script. What it is what you understand. Knowing what to tell your hand to do. If you don't know what to do and you're just kind of looking and trying to copy, you're not processing the data. You're just kind of going along with the current.
Yeah.
And I would ask you, I do this all the time, and not to put you on the spot, but in art, and I say art, but actually in the world as you look out into the world, right? Because art is a representation of what we see. There are two types of edges in the world, right? So the world is made up of colors, a color here and a color here, like maybe this against this, and an edge that connects them. It's either sharp or a gradient. The entire visual spectrum for human beings falls into that. One color sitting against another with an edge that connects it. And it could be this shape against this shape, but it could have all these little variations in the background. Each one of them is a different color, subtly different, with a type of edge that connects it. The type of edge is it's either sharp or it's a fade, a gradient. And there's nothing else. And it's like, so when we talk about fundamentals, breaking it down that simply, that's at a molecular level. What color is this? What color is this? And what type of edge connects it? Now, the next thing over, what color is that? And what edge connects it to this thing? And so on and so on. And you could produce a hyper-realistic painting if you could just see the world that way. And it's like teaching somebody to do that.
Yeah, if you try and follow people who are doing that kind of painting, like, I mentioned I follow a lot of different people on YouTube, or I see them on Instagram or whatever. A lot of times you'll see them putting colors together that like almost seem crazy. Like, why are you putting that really like, I don't know, olive green color next to that brown or whatever? And then by the time the person's done, it's like, oh, okay, well now it makes sense. Now I see it the way that, I see it visually or whatever.
So now
but
the issue
with
that,
counterintuitive,
That's the issue with that, is that can feel like an education, right? You make sense of it. You go, oh, I know why. I understand why they did that. I see how it works. But what you're watching is their experience. 30 years of mixing color, they knew exactly what to do. When you try to do it, it doesn't work because you don't have the experience. And you can't learn someone's experience. You can only earn experience. You can learn the knowledge, but the knowledge is not what you're seeing. You're seeing a lifetime of experience. Why did they grab 3 colors and mix them together? And it's like, you don't even realize when they tapped the paint on with the brush, they picked up a measured amount. They knew exactly how much pressure, how much to grab. You can't do that because you don't have the lifetime of experience. And so it looks like it makes sense. And then you try to do it yourself and you're like, and this could be in anything. I'm sure everybody's experienced where you see something and you're like, oh, I'll do that. That all made sense. And then you do it and it doesn't work out. Cooking food can be like that. Right. And it's like, it doesn't work. And it's like, but I did exactly what I saw. Yeah. You did what you saw, but you didn't understand what you saw. The person doing it understood exactly why they were doing what they were doing. And so 1 degree this way, 1 degree that way for each little thing. And it becomes something completely different based on their understanding. And that understanding comes from a core of knowledge with a lifetime of experience built around it. Like I like to equate it to, like, so in most things, knowledge is kind of like a snowball. It's not a lot, it's a little thing. The knowledge usually fits in the palm of your hand for almost any skill set. What makes it powerful is rolling it around on the ground and turning it into a snowman. That giant ball, right? If for anybody who's ever made a snowman, you start with a little snowball and then it's rolling it around for an hour in the snow can turn it into something the size of a house. The snowball is the knowledge and everything built around it is the experience. The knowledge doesn't make it big, it's the experience that does. But the experience doesn't change the size of the knowledge at its core.
Yeah. No, and I think you're right. And I think there's something too, in one of these books I'm reading nowadays, or it's called The Millions Within. It's by this guy named David Nagel. And he uses this quote that's like a Bruce Lee quote, and I'll screw it up, but it's something to do that if you don't, to know is not valuable. If you can't do something, then you don't actually know it. And I think it's kind of in line with what you were just saying about, how we see things, right? Like understanding what it is you actually see. So it's not that you're not capable of drawing, it's that you're not translating properly what it is you're seeing. And I think part of that is this shorthand that people do where, and I'm guilty of this. I think most people are too, where it's like, oh yeah. I know, like, I know how to do this. I know what a person looks like. I know, these things, but the person who's very skilled at this obviously has spent a lot of time looking at people and really understanding the shapes. And I remember in this figure drawing class, she was explaining to me that basically everything is an outward arc, not an inward arc. And I was like, what? Okay, that's kind of strange, And so she's putting it together and kind of assembling like an arm or whatever and showing me how it's like, no, see, it arcs this way, even though you see it this way, it actually arcs this way,
Right.
And so, I'm sure that's not exclusively true, but like for this particular thing I was working on. But the point is that she was seeing things differently than me. We were looking at the same person. And even me as I guess more experienced than a lot of illustrators or artists, even for me, that was such a foreign thing. I was looking at this person and going, oh, well, I was doing this shorthand in my head that I know what an arm looks like. And so I drew the arm as I know arms to be. Mm-hmm. And I can get away with that in cartooning, right? Like, because it's no problem to draw a cartoon or something and have it look a certain way. But when it comes to portraiture or back to my struggles with likeness, I have an image of what I think that person looks like in my head, but clearly I'm not seeing it, right? I'm not assembling what truly is there in my head, right? So back to this quote, if I can't do it, then I don't truly know, right? So there's something for me to expand there that I need to work on in terms of really knowing what that person's, features look like or whatever.
Actually, I can describe to you where the disconnect is. It actually, so, we have two parts to our brain. We have our mind. We have a conscious mind, which is what we talk to. We hear our own voice. We converse with ourselves. And then the subconscious, which we have no access to. The subconscious mind basically does all the calculation and then gives us the data. It gives us the data it thinks we need. And so to get through life as a normal person, how much visual information do you need? You need to be able to see that there's a car coming so you don't walk out in traffic. You don't step in a hole. You don't accidentally walk into a lion's den, right? There's a limited amount of information that you require visually in order to stay alive. And right, your eyes are your primary driver of survival. Your brain, a third of your brain is dedicated to breaking down and making sense of visual stimulation. And so your subconscious mind only feeds you what you need and nothing more. Being trained in art, properly trained, starts to prompt your subconscious mind for better data. The data you need to be able to see the curve you're talking about, how one thing relates to another, right? So like you think about it, as a kid, most of us have had this experience where we have like the little donut in the water and we dive through it. And it's like, how can you do that? Like your entire body, basically your eyes are able to get you in motion through this little opening in like a little life thing, like a little life preserver, right? I think most kids have had that experience where they've been diving and then they dive through something. And it's like your brain, your eyes they're acute enough in their processing that they can control the entire angle of your body when you jump to make sure that you clear that hole, that opening. And yet somehow you can look at something sitting on a table and not be able to see the proportions. Like, does that make sense? And what it is that that dive, your body is protecting you from injury. It is making sure that you go through that opening. And so it is giving you the data, the real-time data in every single second about how to move your body to make sure that you go through the opening. When you're looking at something sitting on a table, your brain's like, well, what do you need? And if you don't tell me what you need, like over and over and over, that you're looking for certain things, I'll just give you the most basic information. And so when you start consciously prompting your brain, saying, no, that's not enough. I'm looking for this. Eventually your subconscious mind will start giving you that information in the way you need it. And that's what they think when they refer to like seeing like an artist. Once you have those pathways opened, like you walk through the world, like in a state of constant amazement at how beautiful it is, temperature shifts and like all of these things that most people walk around blind to. But you have to be trained. You have to be trained, right? So you would be trained in a way that would then force your subconscious mind to give your conscious mind the data that you need to be able to produce. And then your hand is fully capable of producing, because it doesn't require a lot for your hand to do if your brain tells you. So I'll give you another example of this. If I describe to you an image, we have a ball that's 1 inch in diameter. To the right of that ball is a gap that's 1 inch wide. And to the right of that gap is a ball that is 2 inches in diameter. Could you draw that based on that description? It's pretty straightforward, so. Right? Yeah. It'd be pretty easy. But you don't even have an image in front of you, so how do you do it? Well, what it is you understand what was just described. When we look at a face, we don't understand what we're looking at. We're just trying to draw what we see, trying to make sense of it, but we don't fully understand it. But imagine if the face could be broken down in sentences like that one I just gave you, one piece at a time until you had constructed a face. Each piece being given to you in a bite-sized morsel that you clearly understood, that you could then draw, even without having it in front of you. You could construct a face or a landscape or anything else. So what we want to do is we want to train the subconscious mind through prompts to give us that data in that usable form. That's actually what fundamental art education does. It's very empowering.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's great. And I think, like I say, it's been kind of an underlying theme here, but the notion that it's not that people are, people who do art anyway, aren't special, or let's say expand it to people who are entrepreneurs or whatever it is that you aspire to do in life. Those people aren't somehow unique or different from you. Now they're unique in some ways. Maybe they can do whatever, or they, grew up in a family that did this or whatever. Like everybody's got their things. But at the end of the day, we're all humans and we're all capable of doing what it is that we want to do. And so if you choose art and that's the path that you want to go, and I think that being able to express yourself creatively is a big deal. I think that then you can pursue it. And I think that if we've learned anything from this conversation, it's that it's not about talent. It's really about effort, and that you can go forward and actually do something just because you want to do it. And I think that people should be empowered to understand that they can do that with anything. Whatever Absolutely. It is, with sufficient interest and sufficient energy, you can create just about anything you want to do.
Yeah. As long as you're willing to do the work. There are some limitations, obviously, like IQ is something that is determined in birth. It's just the way your brain works. There are some people who their brain doesn't work at the level that would be necessary to be a neurosurgeon. And that's most of us, Yeah. You need to be able to process data at a certain rate and understand things and be able to move through problem solving on the fly in pressure situations. Some brains are designed for that and some aren't. But for the average person, I believe that the thing that holds them back is the fear of failing. And it's like, if you just do your work and make sure you know what you're getting into, and then jump, and don't have a plan B. Because plan B, it's just too easy when it always gets hard. It doesn't matter what business you have. It always gets hard before it gets good. That I think I've never seen a business that didn't do that. It looks like it's falling apart. I don't know what I'm going to do. And you fight for it. And if you stand your ground, you come out of it and you then reap the benefits of it. It's almost like a final test before you get the reward for the work. And so it's like just too many people have a plan B and they fall back on it. They give up on the dream. And it's understandable. People, you have families, you have responsibilities, but it's like, what do you want? What kind of life do you want to live? For me, I had kids and I opened up a school. My wife did not want me to open the school. She was like, just go back to doing your portraits. I was like, I don't want to. I don't want to be out of town, every weekend out of the year for my work. I'd rather be in town with my kids. And my wife was adamant about me not opening the school. She's like, I don't want you using any of the money in our joint account. So I sold a couple of paintings that had just been sitting on my wall to fund the opening of my school. And going back, when I left construction, you understand, I said I grew up poor. As a construction worker, I was making more money than my parents. I was paying into the house. Like I still lived there because I was paying into the house. And when I came home for that day from construction, I was home early. My mother was like, "Oh, what are you doing home?" And I said, "I quit. I'm going to become an artist." She started crying. Like that was the first interaction I had with anybody telling them that I decided I was going to become an artist. She started crying. She's like, "What is wrong with you? You have a good job. Why would you throw that away? And for all things to become an artist? What are you, nuts?"
Yeah, no, it's so funny. Well, and I think that goes into, kind of the undercurrent of this conversation, which is mindset and understanding, that there's abundance and opportunity and that you can build what you want with hard work and effort.
Mhm.
And it's not always going to be easy, but it doesn't
Yeah.
come down to being smarter or having an opportunity that somebody didn't have or that you wish that you had or whatever. But by focusing on your thing and just doing the work, you'll get to whatever level of prosperity
Yeah.
or skill level or whatever it is that you're capable of doing.
Yeah.
And it just
Well,
requires sufficient time and interest, I think.
yeah. And I would say, like, don't expect it to be easy. If it turns out to be easy, well, great. But don't expect it to be easy. And bet on yourself. Bet on yourself. You can control what you do.
Yeah. Well, and it's such a good point because I think so many people end up kind of living their life for other people, and I think especially nowadays in like a social media world and stuff like that, it's really easy to get caught up in the cool things somebody else is doing or and I do this to some degree, looking at people's art and going, oh man, if only, blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, like I told you before the show, I've been buying art supplies for 2 years. If I'd have been painting by this whole time, I'd be, doing great things by now. So it's like, so in my procrastination or in my, kicking the rock down the road because I was afraid to take that first step, I've delayed my own action. And I did that at the expense of paying attention to other people's lives and what other people are thinking of instead of making that bet on myself, and not even for business, just for me to do something I want to, find joy in, which is painting. If I had taken that bet or taken that leap on myself, I'd be a lot further along now if I'd just hit go. And
Yeah.
so I think, maybe people can learn from that or can at least find instances in their own life where they're kicking something down the road that is the thing they really want to do, but for whatever reason, they're not doing it. And so hopefully they can use this as a little bit of inspiration to get started.
Yeah. Well, look, you know what? I mean, we have these conversations all the time, like in-house with, I forget what the average number of hours a week people spend on Facebook and Instagram. And like, we make the argument that it's like, look, if you're spending, 2 hours a day on Facebook, if you cut that down to 1 hour a day, you could be a professional artist in 1 year. Just commit the time to painting instead of being online. And it's like, what are you getting out of Facebook? What are you getting out of Instagram? Nothing, because, numbing your brain. But it's like, you could develop a skill, and we say art, but it could be anything. Imagine cutting whatever time you spend on social media or TV. Okay, yeah, you love your TV shows, but what if you watch two? Why not watch one and take that other hour and put it into making something better of yourself? A year from now, you'll be thankful that you did. You might
Well,
miss
I
your
think
TV show, but
that's all right. It just drags it out longer anyway. And then you can enjoy your
you
series even longer.
binge watch over the holidays.
Exactly. Well, and I think too, at the end of the day, you'll find there's a confidence that comes in being good at things. And so even if
Yeah.
let's, just use painting as an example, maybe you do want to be an entrepreneur and you're not finding what you want success wise in business or whatever. But in the meantime, in the evenings, you're moonlighting a little bit and you're spending some time learning to paint and you become proficient at that. The feeling of getting good at things is so powerful that I think you'll find that you can start to translate that into every aspect of your life. And
Absolutely.
you'll find the same, whatever that is, a little dopamine hit or whatever, whether it's in your business or it's in your life or in your relationships or wherever you apply this.
Yeah.
So I think, people can say, oh, I never thought I wanted to paint or whatever, but it's like, but understand that becoming skilled at something is something that you can do in lots of places. And art is one of those places where you can subjectively grow and evolve and get as good as you can get. And there's, giant spectrums of people. You've got your Damien Hirsts and your Picassos and your hyper realists and your, these guys. I mean, you could be anything. So there's no objective bar that you have to reach. You don't have to be able to do certain thing in any certain way. Like you can purely just express yourself. and you can become proficient at expressing yourself, which then, can give you the ability to maybe take the bigger step or the bigger risk as it pertains to your business.
Yeah, I would say I don't know how many of the people that come into the programs that we have between the school, the brick and mortar schools, and the online program that are looking for careers. Some of them are, but most of them I think are doing it just for personal enrichment. And it's like, I used to have years ago, I had a woman in here. She came in here. She wanted to learn. The first day she came in, she said to me, I want to learn how to paint portraits. Can you teach me that? And I said, yeah, I'm just going to take a little bit of time. She had rheumatoid arthritis, couldn't even hold a pencil. So we couldn't do any pencil work with her. And the reason that she wanted to learn to paint portraits is she wanted to paint her grandkids. What an incredible thing. I don't think you could find a more noble reason to develop a skill.
Yeah.
It's like learning to, it's like a dad taking singing lessons so he could sing to his babies when they're born. Like it's just like, to me, there was nothing I wouldn't do to get her to where she wanted to be. Because what an incredible thing. Like, you're not doing it for money. You're doing it because you want to be able to leave something behind for your grandchildren. Like, what a cool thing.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's an awesome story. Well, and I think there's probably instances like that. And whether it is your business or it's your art or whatever, I think the skills that you can develop are transferable, and they'll improve your life, whether it's in, as an artist or in any other capacity. So I think if you were on the fence about getting started on something, just go do it. So
yeah, absolutely.
So Kevin, we're kind of at the end of the time. Let's take a quick minute, and just if you want to let people know where they can learn more about Evolve, if you how they can connect with you individually, and if they've got any other questions or anything else you'd like to share.
Yeah, so we actually set up a landing page for your audience. It's evolveartist.com/eggs. And so actually there's a wonderful 7-minute video there that actually shows how fundamentals can be used to build up a piece of art. Like, the most simple, again, I was talking about how simple these things are, how the skills fit in the palm of your hand. They're very little. And then it's just a matter of having experience built around them. And so there's a really nice 7-minute video that shows how a painting is constructed. And it is really remedial, but it kind of gives you an idea of, if you're trained properly, how straightforward the working tools are to build a piece of art. There's another bunch of other resources. You can see some of my students, teenage students. You kind of get an idea of their work. We only showed teenage students because, an adult could have studied for 20 years. A teenager, you're getting them like they're still in diapers when they arrive. They've got no foundational skills. They've not been taught anything. So what you're seeing is purely what they've learned through our program. So we're very particular about that. But yeah, that landing page, evolveartist.com/eggs. Anybody who's interested, and I can be reached through there. There will be a link there, and anybody who was interested in speaking with me, perhaps, could access me there. Any emails that go through there would come to me.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Kevin. I really appreciate you taking the time. It's a lot of fun to talk to you, and hopefully this is the nudge I need to get started painting again. I have been doing Inktober illustrations all October, but I got started late. And so I'm only on day 22 now. So I'll be doing this until middle of November. So it's becoming something else. But I had never, in all my years, I've never gotten past 10 illustrations, and I already doubled that at 22 now.
Oh, good for you.
And I'm going to finish out the year, even if it means getting it done in mid-November. And and that was big for me. So I think for people who are interested in art or taking on any kind of challenge, I think this is a great way to express yourself creatively. I'm excited about the program, and I myself will probably be doing it. So maybe we'll talk more about it here on the show. So, but thanks so much, Kevin. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. Thank you again for having me.
Absolutely. And thanks so much to everybody who tunes into the show this week and every week. And we'll see you guys next time.